In the age of digital connections, Sarah found herself navigating the world of online dating with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. After matching with a charming stranger named Jake on a popular dating app, they quickly hit it off and agreed to meet for a first date at a cozy cafe in the heart of the city. As Sarah waited nervously at the cafe, she couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation tinged with uncertainty. What if Jake wasn't who he claimed to be? What if their connection didn't translate from the digital realm to real life? But as soon as Jake arrived, all of Sarah's worries melted away. He was even more handsome and charming in person, and their conversation flowed effortlessly as they sipped their lattes and laughed together. Encouraged by their instant connection, Sarah agreed to accompany Jake on a spontaneous adventure to a nearby abandoned mansion that he had heard about from a friend. Despite the warning bells ringing in the back of her mind, Sarah couldn't resist the thrill of exploring the unknown with Jake by her side. As they ventured deeper into the decaying mansion, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over her. The air was thick with dust and decay, and the shadows seemed to dance around them, whispering secrets that sent shivers down her spine. But it wasn't until they stumbled upon a hidden room in the depths of the mansion that Sarah's fears were realized. The room was filled with occult symbols and strange artifacts, and a sense of dread washed over her as she realized that they were not alone. With a sinking feeling in her chest, Sarah turned to Jake, only to find that he was no longer the charming stranger she had met online. His eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and his voice was filled with a chilling resonance that sent chills down her spine. Before Sarah could react, Jake lunged forward, his true intentions revealed in a flurry of violence and madness. With nowhere to run and no one to hear her screams, Sarah found herself trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. As the shadows closed in around her, Sarah realized that she had fallen victim to the darkest corners of the online world, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred into nothingness. And as she vanished into the darkness, her fate forever entwined with the horrors of whispered nightmares, she knew that she would never again trust the whispers of a stranger's promises. With her heart pounding in her chest, Sarah struggled against Jake's grip, her mind racing with fear and confusion. She had been lured into a trap, her trust in the charming stranger shattered by the darkness that lurked beneath his facade. As Jake dragged her deeper into the hidden room, Sarah's senses were assaulted by the sights and sounds of the occult. Strange symbols adorned the walls, their meaning lost to the ages, while the air was heavy with the scent of incense and decay. With a sinking feeling in her chest, Sarah realized that she was not the first victim to fall prey to Jake's twisted games. The room was littered with the remains of those who had come before her, their fate a grim reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. Desperate to escape, Sarah searched for a way out, her hands trembling as she tried to pry open a nearby window. But as she struggled against the rusted metal, Jake's laughter filled the room, mocking her futile attempts to break free. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah broke free from Jake's grasp and made a run for the door. But before she could reach safety, she felt a sharp pain in her side, and everything went dark. When Sarah regained consciousness, she found herself bound and gagged, her vision blurred by tears of pain and despair. Jake stood over her, his eyes burning with a twisted mix of triumph and malice as he reveled in her suffering. As Sarah pleaded for mercy, Jake revealed his true intentions, explaining that he was part of a secret society that worshipped ancient deities of darkness. He had lured her here as a sacrifice, offering her up to the gods in exchange for power and immortality. With horror, Sarah realized that she was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. She had fallen victim to the darkest depths of the online world, her trust and naivety exploited by those who sought to do her harm. As Jake raised the sacrificial knife high above his head, Sarah closed her eyes and prayed for a miracle. But as the blade descended towards her chest, she knew that her fate was sealed. In the end, Sarah became just another whispered nightmare, her screams echoing through the hidden room as she was consumed by the darkness that lurked within. And as Jake's laughter filled the air, the shadows closed in around her, swallowing her whole and leaving nothing behind but the echoes of her terror. While browsing through a dating app to alleviate her loneliness, Emily struck up an interesting conversation with Jake, whom she connected with online. Jake's messages were warm and engaging, so they quickly made plans to meet at a cozy cafe in the heart of the city. On the day of their meeting, Emily went to the cafe with anticipation, but also a hint of nervousness. Despite waiting for a few minutes, Jake didn't show up, and he wasn't responding to her messages. After some time, Emily felt relieved to receive a message on her phone. The message stated that Jake had an urgent matter to attend to, and they needed to meet at a different cafe nearby. Despite some hesitation, Emily ultimately decided to go to the address provided in the message. However, upon arriving at the specified address, Emily was met with a horrifying sight. She stood in front of a dark and abandoned apartment building. As her sense of unease grew, another message arrived on her phone, surprising her once again. The message claimed that Jake was on the top floor of the building. With a strange feeling in her gut, Emily entered the building. The corridors were silent and dark, with only the sound of her footsteps echoing. She called out for Jake, but received no response. As she approached the room, she began to hear strange noises. When she opened the door, she froze in horror. Standing before her was Jake, but his presence was unexpected and unsettling. Jake's eyes were hollow, his face expressionless. Emily's heart began to race as she realized the truth. Jake wasn't real. He must have been some sort of ghost or spirit. Terrified, Emily tried to flee, but the ghostly apparition of Jake continued to advance towards her. Emily attempted to escape, but the corridors of the apartment building seemed like a labyrinth, with every direction dark and menacing. Finally, when she found herself trapped in a room, the ghost of Jake cornered her. Emily realized she couldn't escape and that she wouldn't survive. In a final effort, she took out her phone and wrote a last message. "Help, I'm here." But before she could send the message, the lights went out, and the room plunged into darkness with a chilling scream. The glow of Jake's apparition faded away. Emily's voice was silenced forever. In the end, the apartment building fell silent once more, leaving behind only the echoes of Emily's screams and message. Bad connections indeed, as Emily's fate remained unknown to all. The anticipation built as I meticulously prepared for the blind date my friends had arranged. Their insistence on this mysterious man being my perfect match filled me with a mix of excitement and apprehension. With no details provided other than the promise of compatibility, I found myself drawn to the intrigue of the encounter. As I arrived at the designated meeting spot, a surge of nervous energy coursed through me. Moments stretched into eternity until finally he appeared. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, his features obscured until he drew nearer. Yet as he approached, an unsettling feeling crept over me. There was a peculiar emptiness in his eyes, devoid of warmth or emotion, like windows to a soul lost in the void. Despite this unsettling first impression, I brushed it aside, chalking it up to pre-date jitters. Our initial conversation flowed smoothly, the banter easy and light. Yet, as the night wore on, a subtle shift occurred. His anecdotes took a darker turn, each tale tinged with a hint of malevolence that sent a shiver down my spine. His laughter, once infectious, now rang hollow and discordant, echoing in the cavernous space between us. In a moment of distraction, my gaze momentarily faltered, and when it returned, I was met with a chilling sight. The facade of civility melted away, revealing a sinister glint in his eyes that froze me in place. Panic surged through me, but before I could react, the darkness enveloped us, swallowing any hope of escape. As the evening drew to a close, I reluctantly agreed to let him drive me home. It was a decision I would soon come to regret. As I settled into the passenger seat, a sense of unease washed over me, intensified by the eerie stillness that hung in the air. It was then that I saw a subtle shift in his demeanor, a flicker of malice lurking beneath the surface. In that moment, the truth became painfully clear. The man my friends had vouched for, the one I had naively agreed to meet, was not who he seemed. Behind the charming facade lurked a darkness so profound, it threatened to consume me whole. Now, as I sit in the suffocating silence of his car, I am acutely aware of the danger that surrounds me. The night stretches on endlessly, each passing moment a reminder of the peril I now find myself in. In the end, it seems, my blind date has become a nightmare from which there may be no awakening.